Atlanta News First Plus starts now.
We are 90 minutes away from the first 2024 presidential debate between President Joe Biden and presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump right here in Midtown Atlanta. Tonight's debate is the first between a sitting and a former president to be televised. Good evening. I'm Sean Gables.
And I'm Brendan Keith. But make no mistake, this is set to be a very tense rematch between these two men. You can watch tonight's debate on our channel, Atlanta News First, and the debate will run for 90 minutes. There is no studio audience here in Atlanta. It is hosted by CNN's Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. Then join us at 11 p.m. for a full analysis of the action on stage.
Atlanta News First anchor Blair Miller is live at the McCamish Pavilion. That's where the presidential debate headquarters in Midtown Atlanta will be. Blair, journalists from over 85 different countries are gathered in that spin room for tonight's debate.
Yeah, Sean and Brendan, you may recall when I came on air here around 4 o'clock for our first broadcast to talk about how busy it was. It wasn't very busy. Now it is quite busy with a lot of surrogates here, a lot of the media here. This is called the spin room, and this is where the candidates' aides and supporters start to show up here, and they will come after the debate, but then many of them already showed up before the debate, and they'll be here during the debate, and this is exactly how it sounds. They are offering their spin on what the candidate has said, but also what the challenger has or has not said. And so it is turning out to be a very busy place. It'll be much busier when this debate ends around 10:30. Let's turn to Atlanta News First political reporter Doug Reardon. He is live there on the floor, also here at McCamish Pavilion. So Doug, this debate really setting the tone for what's ahead in this election.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to show you real quick. You mentioned this is called the spin room. Well, here's why. This is where candidates are going to be spinning not only after the debate, some of the performance aspects of it, but also before some of the policies that could be talked about tonight. Who you're looking at right now, that is Byron Donalds. He's a very young congressman from Florida, but he is also being talked about in the conversation as a potential pick for vice president tonight. And we know that there has been some reporting out there the former President Trump might actually make that selection here on stage tonight in Atlanta, which would be very exciting. Gino, over here, we're going to show you guys what the set looks like for CNN. They have their own debate set down here. That's Chris Wallace, Kristen Collins, some really big names from the network. And so they're doing their own thing over there. And of course, you have to wonder, these are the same candidates as 4 years ago. We know them well. We know their policies and we know their stances on things. So who is this really for, right? And when we talk about who has not made up their minds yet, even though that is potentially a very small number of folks, that sometimes makes a difference. We know that Joe Biden won Georgia and, in fact, the presidency here in Georgia because of just 12,000 votes, even less than that. And so when we talk about undecided voters in the state, that is who we'll be watching very, very closely tonight, as one of our political experts explained to us this week.
The 5, 6, or 7 swing states in play, the undecided voters in those swing states are the ones who decided the 2020 election and the 2016 election. So when you're just looking at those people, would a debate make a difference? Absolutely.
Yeah, a big difference, and we know that it only needs to make a small difference. The margins between these two right now are razor thin. An Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll that came out just this week showed them with a 5% differential going towards former President Donald Trump. So all it would take, guys, is 6% for him to win Georgia, and we know there are at least that many number of undecided voters out here in Blair. And so I know they're going to be keeping a very close eye on things tonight as this debate happens.
Yeah, and Doug, with so much time between now and Election Day, it certainly is ripe for those undecided voters. Thanks so much. Now, I recently sat down with a group of likely voters from all backgrounds here in Metro Atlanta. We talked about tonight's debate and what they hope to see and hear. And front and center for all of them, the economy.
What's most important to you all as we get ready for this debate?
Finding out the truth. The truth. Number one, that both candidates come across with factual information and data and as truthful as we possibly can be in a political environment.
How hard do you think that will be?
Very.
I want to hear real solutions and not just tell us what the problems are, because we know what the problems are because we're living in them.
But what do you think is the most important issue in this election right now? That may be very different than the issue you want to hear about.
I think the most important issue is the economy right now, the continued rising cost of food.
How many of you would say the economy is issue number one?
I would. Unfortunately, it affects everybody regardless of your political affiliation.
So to me, the economy is definitely, I think, would be as a big issue.
They need to talk about, what they plan to do on how people are being paid when they work, and we need to figure out how we're going to bring the economy back down to where it's comfortable for everybody.
We do have a low jobs number. There are still people being laid off, and so it's not accurate. And so I want the accurate information.
And the candidates certainly will talk about their plans to help the economy. Those voters will be listening, but so will voters all across the area. Now, we've been talking with voters about, where they stand on this. If anything that happens tonight, could it shift how they will vote? And at this point, many of those, at least those voters I spoke with, said they're not ready to do that. We will be fact-checking everything that these candidates say during this debate and after the debate, but this group was most vocal about the criminal charges that President Trump faces, and so I have to see if that comes up here tonight and how significantly. But for the first time this week, there's been a shift in the standings if people were to vote today. And here's what we're seeing out of a poll from Quinnipiac University. They put this out this week, and it puts former President Trump ahead of President Biden, 49-45, as you can see. Now I want to bring in our political analyst, Dr. Ben Taylor from Kennesaw State University. Thank you so much for being here with us. You've been with us all afternoon. You'll be with us throughout the evening. So, watching for this tonight, and we know the format's going to be different. How significant do you think that's going to be with this debate here this evening?
I think the difference in format is really crucial because it requires that both candidates are going to have their time as opposed to talking over each other, which we saw in 2020. Sure. And not having an audience is also going to be a big change because that means neither candidate will be able to feed off whatever energy would be in the room. There won't be much energy in the room. It's just a television studio, the candidates and the moderators.
What do you think voters are watching for? Because not a lot has changed on the issues with these candidates, but are they watching more of the issues or are they watching the optics of these candidates?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I think mainly voters want, or at least undecided voters in polls have suggested they want to see Joe Biden show vitality, show that he has some engagement in ways that they may not see him do that all the time. And the same with former President Trump. They want to see him have a command of the issues that perhaps in the past he really hasn't. He's shown a lot of fight and vitality, but not really very specific on details given his policy platforms and what have you. So I think voters would like to see that from both candidates.
We were talking earlier about the charges that former President Trump has faced or facing and the recent conviction. How much focus will that get, whether it's from Biden or the moderators?
I think it's going to get a lot of focus because polling shows that people really care about that quite a lot. And the Biden campaign has made it a focal point of their early attack ads. In fact, billboards all around the Atlanta metro area have been highlighting this fact as well. And so I think that's a crucial issue for the Biden campaign, but polls show that the American people care about it as well. So I have no doubt the moderators will bring that up probably early.
What's really interesting about this is that you have these two who've debated before in a previous election cycle, the exact same candidates.
Right.
What do you think their vulnerabilities are, each one of them?
Well, for Trump, I think the issue for him is, his general reactivity. So Donald Trump is a reactive person. He's instinctual in the way he engages on these kinds of debate stages. And so that is a challenge for him because that's what voters don't like sometimes about the Trump administration 4 years ago and things of that nature. Similarly for Joe Biden, they want to see that he is specific and to the point and that he can engage in a robust and vigorous way, which he potentially has not more recently. And so voters would like to see that. And there are very possible pitfalls for both candidates, and there are very real opportunities, particularly for undecided voters. It's hard to imagine that a voter wouldn't be decided given the history of these candidates, but at the same time, people aren't always paying attention to politics 24 hours a day, and so it's sort of an out-of-sight, out-of-mind thing. They're living their lives, and so now they're going to be reacquainted with these guys on the same stage together.
I had someone this morning, I told them we were going to be down here for the debate, and they said to me, I still don't know who to vote for either way. How significant do you think that is? I mean, is this debate for that type of person at this point?
This is exactly who is going to benefit from this debate. Now, what's going to happen is whether they watch it tonight or not is one thing, so the real-time reaction people will have. But what's going to be really crucial are the next 48 hours. How the campaigns use the content of the debates themselves, how the media discuss it, and how voters respond to it over time. And if there's some movement among those moderate independent voters towards the Trump or the Biden campaign, and what that looks like in national polling over the next week or two, that's going to be really important.
Yeah, how much can each one take off?
Right.
What do you think we'll be talking about tomorrow morning? And I know we always go into these debates, and I've covered a bunch before, and you always think this is going to be the focus the next day. It never is.
Right.
It's usually never about the issues.
Yeah.
It's about usually some gaffe or some interpersonal issue or some snippet that has made its way on social media for 10 seconds. But what do you think we'll be talking about tomorrow morning?
Well, I think we will be talking about the candidate who is able to use the moments in the debate to frame their opponent in their preferred way, and if they were able to capitalize on who, the issue that they wanted to capitalize. So for the Biden campaign, you're imagining something like abortion, and for the Trump campaign, you're thinking about something like immigration or inflation. If they can use that issue to highlight the differences between their candidacy and their opponent, that's what they want us to be talking about. And the issue is who can deliver that the most effectively, Biden or Trump. And that's what we'll be talking about.
When I was talking to some voters earlier this week in Marietta, we heard from them a little earlier, many of them were talking about President Biden's stamina. He's going to be part of a debate for 90 minutes tonight,
right.
And they want, Democrats and Republicans are both saying this.
Yeah.
They want to see what kind of stamina he's going to have.
Yeah.
How significant is that? And if there is a gaffe, how significant will that be?
Oh, I think we know how significant this debate is for the Biden campaign because they proposed it. It's their idea. They wanted to be on the front foot. They wanted to make sure that they were calling the shots, as it were, and making sure this happened. And so they obviously know that having President Biden debate for 90 minutes in this, very confined format, it's going to be very cognitively difficult. It's going to be difficult physically because you actually stand there and talk. That it's really crucial that for the Biden campaign that voters see him as someone who can do this very complex and difficult task. And the same thing is true for Donald Trump, actually. The Trump campaign also wants to show Donald Trump is up to this task as well. So I think that's really what voters care about, is seeing that these candidates can be presidential in that way. That's always the thing we look at in these campaign events and debates particularly is this person presidential? And so they both want to put that air off to prospective voters.
I know this is your first time actually inside a spin room, and you see the activity here and this taking place here in Atlanta. It speaks to the importance that Georgia has in this election. We saw what happened 4 years ago, something that hasn't happened in decades, and the polling showing it may lean back to that.
Right.
What is the local audience watching for tonight that maybe the national audience isn't watching for?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So the economy is always a huge deal in presidential debates and campaigns in general. And the Georgia economy is interesting because the Georgia economy, we saw Governor Kemp today in the spin room, and one of the things that Governor Kemp talks about all the time and has done a lot of work on is getting manufacturing into Georgia, EVs and things of that nature, the sort of green economy jobs, as President Biden would talk about them, but I don't think Governor Kemp would call them that. But it's all of a piece. And so the Biden campaign actually has a story to tell about that in Georgia, and Georgia voters, Georgia citizens are benefiting from it. But it's an interesting topic, though, because nationally the economy, particularly because of inflation, is seen somewhat negatively. But in Georgia, there's some positive economic stories to talk about. So how they are able to frame that for their preferred, position on the economy is going to be really crucial.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how much focus is put out there on Atlanta and Georgia in this debate. So thanks so much for joining us here this evening. I know we'll be talking to you more in a few minutes and really helping us as we walk through this and digest this tonight. But Brendan and Sean, sending it back to you, things certainly, if you look here behind me, getting pretty busy tonight as some of these surrogates, as campaign aides, and get ready for this debate, which is now a little more than an hour away.
Yeah, Blair, thanks so much. Georgia, it's not a blue or red, it's purple, as we saw in your interview.
Absolutely.
And if you want to keep up with every big moment in tonight's debate, text the word debate to the number on your screen. Our team will send you stories throughout the debate tonight.
The candidates' return to Georgia highlights how important Peach State voters are to this next election. President Biden arrivals at Dobbins Air Reserve Base marks his third trip to Atlanta this year. Our cameras were also there when former President Donald Trump touched down at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport just hours ago. This is his second trip to Georgia this year. Georgia's top political leaders, they are speaking out ahead of tonight's first and highly anticipated presidential debate.
Yeah, Atlanta News First Rachel Aragon is in Atlanta, where people are predicting another close race in Georgia come November.
Political leaders of different parties are hoping for different outcomes this November, and they're weighing in on which candidate would best benefit Georgians.
Myself, I believe we're going to have a secure, accessible, fair election in the great state of Georgia, and I'm looking forward to that.
That was Georgia Governor Brian Kemp on Wednesday. Despite not voting for Trump in the primary, Kemp, a Republican, says he'll support the ticket in November. But before Trump and Biden face off at the ballot box this fall, they'll square off in Atlanta tonight in the first presidential debate of the campaign season.
And I think that's where President Trump has an opportunity to really talk about those things and say, hey, you know, gas prices weren't this high when I was president. Your insurance wasn't this high. Your mortgage rates weren't this high.
Thank you very much, Senator Warnock, for being here.
In Atlanta, on the day of the debate, Georgia Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock sending a different message to voters in the Peach State.
Anything you do other than showing up to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris pushes us closer toward that scary alternative.
The Democratic senator says he's been with the president and the vice president in Georgia several times over the last few months.
So every vote counts. We will continue to spread the message about the fact that black wealth is up over 60% since before the pandemic. The fact that we've done $164 billion of student debt cancellation.
In Atlanta, Rachel Aragon, Atlanta News First.
Tonight's debate bringing an overwhelming amount of traffic to Metro Atlanta. It's tough out there.
And it's typically tough.
It was tough to get to work.
Well, it's even worse today. Drivers are battling congestion in Midtown and downtown Atlanta. First Alert meteorologist Cutter Martin joins us. You're doing double duty for us tonight. Get us around this mess.
Yeah, we're certainly watching the roadways here for you. We have a pretty well-defined grid as to where the most issues exist. A northern portion of that would be 10th Street east and westbound, really between Peachtree and Midtown, and north side there in West Midtown. And as far south as Mercedes-Benz, not because of the debate, but we do have a big soccer game that is letting out, adding more people to the roadways. Just keep in mind, if you are going north and southbound on the interchange, the 75-85 corridor adjacent to Midtown, you still can't exit 10th Street. We have flashing lights, so noticing some normal cars. So while the debate is ongoing, they may have briefly opened a lane or two. I still would not count on being able to exit 10th Street. And keep in mind, after the debate, they still have to leave town. There will be some rolling closures on 75-85, 75 northbound to Dobbins, and 85-75 southbound to Hartsfield-Jackson. So if you work the third shift tonight, or if you have late evening plans, still could be some rolling closures. We'll keep you updated right here. Traffic conditions always in the bottom of the First Alert weather app, guys.
Cutter, thank you. Atlanta News First political reporter Doug Reardon also live tonight inside the McCamish Pavilion. And Doug, both candidates, they are fresh off of campaign events in and around Atlanta, hoping to win over voters unsure that either have what it takes to lead this country for the next 4 years.
Yeah, and you know, I think a lot of people would find it hard to believe that those people exist because these are the same candidates as the last presidential election. And of course, a lot of people have already made up their minds on this, but those undecided voters are incredibly important. Let me show you around real quick because we are in the spin room where, as you can see over here, there is some spinning going on. The candidates and their surrogates are now starting to arrive here. And so, of course, this is going to be kind of central for getting those points across off the debate stage and trying to get across some of the policy issues that both Donald Trump and Joe Biden will talk about up there on stage today. So there are media outlets from over 85 different countries here in this room, and they are all covering this debate here in Atlanta, where, again, as we mentioned, there are so many undecided voters who are yet to make up their mind on who they want as their next president. And that is very important in a state like this because we know from 2020 there was only a 12,000 vote differential between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. It won Joe Biden the state, and not only that, it won him the presidency as well. And so those even 10%, 12% of undecided voters could really make or break the election. And of course, it's not just Democrats or Republicans they're trying to win over, or independents for that matter. It might even be members of their own party. Yesterday at the Capitol, a couple miles away from here, there was a group of Republicans, including including former Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, that said they would be voting for Biden. They said Trump is dangerous for democracy. Another Republican who Trump has not always gotten along with is Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. But we got a chance to speak to him right here in this spot today and asked him, what do you want to hear from Trump that would put your mind at ease? Right. And, you know, you've had, I suppose, a fraught relationship at times with former President Trump. What do you want to hear from him tonight that will be valuable for Georgians?
Yeah, well, look, you know, the president, former president's been mad at me at times. I'm not mad at him, but I think it's a great opportunity for him tonight to really post up against Joe Biden's record. He's got to be disciplined, and I'm sure Joe Biden's going to try to pull him into the past and, you know, get under his skin. And I just think he's got to be forward-thinking and tell people what he's for and why they should vote for him.
And of course, this is also the earliest presidential debate in U.S. election history, and there's a good reason for that. We're just a couple months out now from that actual election in November, but states are starting to vote in some cases even a month before actual election day. And so we've heard from both campaigns the reason that they chose Atlanta was very clear. The reason they chose the time now was so that they could message to voters well ahead of when some of them would start to get thinking about heading to the polls to cast their ballot. We can't just wait until September. A lot of these campaign officials told me to start making it known who we are and what we stand for, and so they wanted to get at these voters early and get their points out there well before any voting starts to happen at all, Blair.
Doug, I'll take it from here. We're going to go back to Atlanta News First anchor Blair Miller. He's live at the McCamish Pavilion.
That's right. Blair is right now with our political analyst, Kennesaw State University professor Ben Taylor, with this excellent analysis of what to expect tonight. And the real question is which Biden is going to show up and which Trump is going to show up.
Yeah, and I think that's what everybody's asking. You know, what are we going to see, and what versions of these candidates are we going to see? You know, we're right above where Doug was just a few minutes ago. You talk about Vivek Ramaswamy. From where we are, you see about 30, 40 members of the media swarming around him, as Doug was saying, doing that spin, and that's going to be even more significant. But I want to ask you, we talk about, you know, those VP contenders.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to hear that tonight?
Who the vice president is? It's very possible, right? Donald Trump is a very savvy media operator. It would make a huge splash for him to announce his vice president tonight. It's possible, but you know, you can't know until we know. Sure. But I think it would be an interesting way to make news out of the debate that was not related to the debate, which may be beneficial depending on how it goes.
Brendan was just saying a few minutes ago, you know, what version of these candidates are going to show up tonight, and how significant is that, and really kind of setting the tone for these next few months?
Well, I think it's really crucial because voters want to get reacquainted with these candidates, and the most important thing is, if we recall 4 years ago, people were disenchanted with Donald Trump's general sort of affect and the way he operated as president, and he's been away for 4 years. So voters who were getting reacquainted with him may be thinking, well, you know, has he changed? Is he better in ways that I didn't think he was good before? Things of that nature. And so that can matter in a debate like this. And the same thing for President Biden. He wants to show that he has vitality and vigor and that he's on top of things, and that, you know, despite the fact that he's 81 years old, he's still capable of doing the job as strenuous as it is.
You and I were talking about the schedule of all this a little earlier, because to the average voter, this is just a debate. They're busy. They've got things going on. They're traveling for the summer. They're hanging out with their kids. But it's just a debate to most people. But you and I were talking about how the timing of this, because this is significantly earlier than we typically see debates in a presidential election.
Yes.
How could that impact those undecided voters and the rest of the cycle?
Well, it's going to impact them significantly because it's going to give both campaigns a lot of fodder for campaign ads. It's going to generate a lot of fundraising for both campaigns, and it's really going to frame the stakes of the campaign in a way that you really sometimes have to wait till late summer to have, you know, the conventions and things like this. But we're getting it here in late June, so a full month ahead of schedule. And that really matters because we no longer have election day, we have election month. And so people aren't waiting until November to vote. They're voting in October. They're early voting. They're absentee voting. And so making their decision earlier will allow them to make their vote earlier. And then the campaigns can try to bank those votes, try to pinpoint where those voters are, and then where the late undecided voters are later in the fall.
What do you think these candidates have been preparing for? We know they've been really preparing for this night, but what are they preparing most for at this point, you think?
Right. That's a great question. I think the main thing that these candidates are trying to do at this point is they're trying to find a couple of opportunities where they can bring the issues they want to talk about to the American people and bring up personal stories about voters they've met on the campaign trail or people they've met while they were in office that they can use to highlight those issues and bring it home to the American people. The thing that we have to remember about presidential debates is that the candidates aren't actually talking to each other or even the moderators. They're really trying to talk through the camera to the American people.
The camera.
Yeah. They're trying to talk to the voters. And the candidate who is better able to do that, not get caught up in the back and forth and possible bickering and not argue with the moderators, that is going to be the candidate who is going to be the most successful.
You can't underscore how important that is, because some of the recent polling shows 70% of voters don't like either candidate.
Right,
and that's
yeah.
a significant number.
That's right.
And when I was talking to voters earlier this week, they said the same thing. We don't really have another choice. This is kind of what we're stuck with.
That's right.
So how does that play into not only doing well on the issues or not getting caught in some kind of gap, but really just trying to be likable?
Right, exactly. No, that's really crucial in this debate context. You're trying to show that you're personable, that you're someone that voters can relate to in some way. But we have some precedent for this. In 2004, President George W. Bush faced Senator John Kerry, and President Bush had fairly poor approval ratings and had some pretty high unfavorables. Remember, the Iraq War was going on, the economy was getting soft, and what the Bush campaign did very effectively was they made the argument that, you might not like me much, but you know where I stand. They gave voters something else to think about rather than how much they liked or didn't like George W. Bush as a person. And that is what saw him to victory. He won a majority of the vote in 2004 and won a second term.
What do you think is going to be the prime issue tonight? Will the economy be the top issue tonight, inflation and talking about those issues?
I think so. The economy is the top issue in every presidential election. Former President Trump is going to want to talk about immigration. President Biden is going to want to talk about abortion rights and women's rights issues. And then the economy is variable in the sense that there are some positive economic stories to tell in some sense in some places in the country, but inflation and the cost of living across the country is obviously the big deal. And so how President Biden talks about that and how former President Trump uses that as an attack line is going to be really interesting to watch.
How much of their messaging tonight shapes the rest of this campaign? Some will say this is really when the heart of the campaigns get going now.
Oh, for sure. And I think tonight both campaigns are going to try to use this as the starting blocks. They want to use what happens tonight for fodder for campaign ads. They want to use it for rallies. They want to use it for fundraising. And they want to be able to take this momentum they can get tonight and then sprint through election night, although it's 130 days away. So.
Well, we'll be watching it all tonight, and on we go. So thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Ben Taylor from Kennesaw State University. Now, we know voters will be watching tonight's debate to talk about some of those issues that you and I have been talking about. And they believe it will be contentious at times with no shortage of personal attacks. I sat down with a group of voters from all different backgrounds here in Metro Atlanta earlier today, and they told me they expect some heated moments, really, from both candidates.
How important is all that, the optics of this debate?
I do think that Biden's will be tested in his ability to communicate for that long a period of time.
I personally will be looking at his stamina because it's 90 minutes, how he controls his temper. I need for him to come across more energetic for the younger generation because I feel that they're going to be a key to this election.
His cognitive ability have been in the decline even since when he first took office.
Do you worry about former President Trump coming across as a bully?
It matters, the temperament. I don't like Trump's temperament. He scares me. It gives me anxiety. He is a bully.
He's a businessman, and he comes across because of that. The real person is not a bully.
Yeah.
He is a brash, aggressive real estate person. And if you know that kind of personality, that's who he is. But by the same token, he has a heart, and he does.
That would not be in the list of words that I would use. It kind of defines who he is as a person. He bullies people in his rhetoric, and that's spread to some of his supporters. It's also what kind of person do you project yourself as out into the world.
I hope that after this debate, everybody knows closer to who they're going to pick.
We will certainly see. Recent polling shows most voters have already made up their minds, but also shows it's those younger voters who remain the most undecided going into the election. We'll be watching how it all unfolds here tonight, how this debate could impact those groups and many more. So Brendan and Sean, a little more than an hour left until all eyes here on what these candidates have to say and how they treat each other.
Blair, great insight. Thanks so much for that. The presidential debate now starts in just about an hour. You can watch live on Atlanta News First, followed by CBS News analysis.
Our streaming pre-debate coverage continues right now with local news live wherever you stream. And remember, you can also watch the debate live wherever you stream Atlanta News First Plus. If you want to watch on your TV tonight, turn to Atlanta News First starting at 9 p.m.
And then stay tuned for Atlanta News First at 11 for local reaction to tonight's biggest moments.